In this video, we're looking at the last of these SACE capabilities, and that is personal and social capacity. SACE listed as a couple of broad different headings, such as self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and social management. And we're going to break these down in this lesson into a couple of really important characteristics that translate to getting jobs, maintaining jobs, and succeeding in the future. So they list the personal social capacity here. They talk about developing personal attributes and aptitudes with things like confidence, self-discipline, goal setting, which we'll see a lot more next term, interdependence, resilience, initiative, and adaptability. It talks about recognizing community involvement and how that develops an appreciation of diverse perspectives, making a contribution to civil society, creating an understanding of relationships, as well as building interpersonal and intrapersonal, which we're going to look at in this lesson, and what the difference is and what specifically they are, as well as working effectively in teams, handling situations constructively. And we're going to look at initiative, examples of it, give you some scenarios, and talk about how can you improve on initiative, which is a very highly sought after skill in all industries. So personal and social capacity comes down to things like personal identity, resilience, self-esteem, your own well-being, flexibility, the contribution that you can provide in a group in terms of teamwork, as well as just supporting a team, customer service, communication and leadership, and initiative, which we will cover as well. So it's a very broad heading, and as you can see from some of these things like customer service, communication, leadership, initiative, resilience, these are all extremely important capabilities to have in pretty well any industry. If you're applying for a job, they're going to want to see these things at an interview. If you get a job, you're going to need to prove these things in order to get promoted, and things like that. So they're very, very important capabilities to understand and know how can I actually do these things and how can I interpret these things. So first we're going to look at initiative. Initiative is something that I value very, very highly, and it's a very highly sought after skill in a lot of industries, but it's also not very common. So when we break down some of these examples, you'll start to see why initiative isn't a very common skill. An example of this is in the military, for example, their three main beliefs are courage, initiative, and teamwork. And so obviously courage and teamwork make sense that they're very important skills for a military organization, but the fact that initiative is in there in their top three of their motto states just how important it can be in a team environment and in providing or contributing to an organization. By definition, initiative is the ability to assess and initiate things independently, as well as the power or opportunity to act or take charge before others do. So that's the definition of it. We're going to break it down and talk about some examples, and I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios to consider. Let's say you see that someone broke a glass bottle and it's on the floor in the shared office kitchen. No one is around when you see it and walk in, and you've got two options. You can either clean it up or you can leave it there and no one's ever going to know that you saw it, so it becomes someone else's problem. Taking initiative means that you are that person that cleans it up. You don't think twice about it, you just do it. And you're not doing it to try and get praise from someone. That's the other piece. It's not about doing it for a reward, it's about doing it because you know it's the right thing to do. So you don't leave it there, you don't pretend that you didn't see it and expect someone else to deal with it. That's an example of initiative. You can either clean it up yourself or you could notify the janitorial staff, but as long as you don't just leave it there, pretend like you never saw it and walk away, you've demonstrated that you have some initiative there. So that's a very simple example to give you some perspective. There's two different types of people in this scenario. The first person takes responsibility when something is put in front of them. They don't just say, that's not my job or that's not my problem. It's a bit like a very simple example would be, say you get asked to pick up a piece of rubbish in the yard. Rather than going, oh, that's not my rubbish, or I didn't put it there, that's someone else's job, you could take that initiative and be like, you know what, I know it's not mine, but I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to pick it up. And that sets an example for everyone else. You're becoming that leader. So this person that says, that's not my job, they would know that it would be dangerous to leave the glass there. Someone else could get hurt themselves if it was left behind. If it was actually found out later that someone tripped and hurt themselves, then that would actually be your fault. You would be negligent in a court of law. So obviously in this case, this is maybe a little bit arbitrary. You can have much more significant cases, but this is a workplace health and safety issue. So in this example, you absolutely could be negligent, and that person could take you to court for negligence and you could be prosecuted for it. So it's a legal offense in this example. No one would know about it since you were the only one there to see it. So that's the mindset. But you would know. So you would know if that person got hurt. In the back of your mind, if in your conscience, you'd be like, hey, I could have prevented this. And so it's easy just to avoid that. A person who takes initiative knows that they have the responsibility to, at a minimum, just inform someone. So you don't have to necessarily clean it up. You could be like, it's not my job to clean this up, but I can go inform my leader, my manager, the janitor, something like that, and get it dealt with before someone gets hurt. This is an example I pulled from a corporate website talking about initiative. So they said that they once worked with a hiring manager who would drop a pen in each interview on purpose. As the candidate walked into the office where they were being interviewed, there would always be a pen on the ground in a noticeable spot on the floor. And they did this as a strategic test to see whether the candidate, the applicant, would actually take the initiative to pick the pen up, or whether they'd just walk past it and pretend that they didn't see it. So sometimes companies and organizations will do subtle things like this just to test whether you have initiative or not. It's the same as walking into a classroom and there's a chair left up on a table. Initiative would be as simple as being, I know that chair doesn't need to be up, I'm going to put it down, rather than just pretend that it's not there. So this is a really good example. And in this case, you can see that employers are doing things like this to test you at an interview. And again, it shouldn't just be because, I want the job, so I'm going to do it. It should be because you know it's the right thing to do. This initiative concept is the difference between a child and an adult. So a child does things for attention. They want that praise. They want that attaboys or good job tigers from someone. They want the lollipops, the smarties. They want the candy reward. The grown-up shouldn't actually require this anymore. The keyword is shouldn't. We should be emotionally mature that we see something that might be a risk to our fellow humans, we would do something about it and we wouldn't hesitate, even if no one else saw us or cared but us. And that's a really important aspect there. It's all about doing it even if no one's looking, and it's all about doing it even if you know no one is going to praise you for it. That is the mature adult response to it. Initiative shouldn't be because I want the candy or I want the praise or I'm going to get a promotion if I show initiative. It should just be because you know it's the right thing to do. And it's always going to come out. You know, you can do it for a period of time because you want that promotion or you want to look great, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be obvious whether you are a person that takes initiative by choice or whether you're consciously doing it for a reason. Let's look at another example. So this was the bus charter case. So this was a situation where you've got two different ways. One shows initiative, one shows pretty much zero initiative. So your manager or someone like that asks you to call the bus company and book a charter bus for a yearly event for the company. The bus company comes back saying that they can't accommodate us for the date that we want or the backup date that we had in mind. They're all booked out for that month. So what do you do from that point? Pause the video for just a second. Have a bit of a think about what would your response be. You've called the company, they said, sorry, you can't have that date. The backup date's taken as well. We're booked out for the month. What do you do from this point? How do you respond to that scenario? Think about what you would do. Option one is just to immediately go and tell your manager. So you can just go straight back to them and say, hey, bus company has no availability. Let's leave it at that, wait for a reply. Do nothing until you get a response from the manager. Option two is that before you go to your manager, you do some of your own independent thinking. And that leads you to some research of your own. You then come to your manager with a much better response, such as, the bus company you asked me to check was booked, so I looked into these other options. And you might list a few others. 3 of them have availability, and here are the prices and models of buses available. I made a sheet comparing them, and I recommend we go with this one for these reasons. It's the same price, it can accommodate everyone, and it has a similar bus, so the change will be minimal to what we're used to. They can also make a yearly reservation so we don't run into this again. So that's a very comprehensive response. It obviously doesn't have to be that full on, depending on the scenario and who you work for, but you can see that in this case, a lot of initiative has been taken. The second response saves the manager from doing the thinking, which they shouldn't need to do as it's your responsibility. You are assigned to deal with this task. So you need to see that through. No matter what the roadblocks are, you can't just handball this back and say, sorry, they're booked out, I'll leave that with you. This is the mistake a lot of people make, is they think that it's the manager's responsibility to do all of their thinking for them. And this is where initiative comes in. Initiative is also just about thinking for yourself. not needing someone to constantly tell you every step of the way what to do now, what to do now. And think about it, if you were the boss, if you're a CEO of a big company and this happened, who would you rather have working on your team? Would you rather employ and promote someone that was in scenario 2, that goes and does all this work and cross-checks and compares and gives you the best possible option? They give you solutions, rather than the person says, no, we've got a problem, I'll leave it there. So we want someone in any industry, you always want someone that brings solutions to a problem, not just complains about the problem. A solution person links to initiative, and that's what companies want. Another example is taking initiative by giving difficult feedback. Let's say the CEO stood up to conduct a meeting or a training, and you notice that his fly is undone. You immediately pull him aside and let him know privately that his fly was down. He goes to the side, just out of sight, zips his fly back up, thanks you for sparing him the embarrassment of going through an entire presentation with his fly down, and you say, yep, no problem. That wasn't a comfortable thing to do. It is very uncomfortable to tell someone, hey, your fly's undone, or your underwear is showing, or your pants are tucked into your socks, or anything like that, or you've got something on your face. It's a very uncomfortable thing to do. But if you didn't do it, you know that there's a good chance that someone else might not either. So you would be responsible for being the one that let him go through this presentation and embarrass himself in front of a whole group of people for no good reason other than it's an uncomfortable situation. And this is a great initiative example because there are actually very few people who would do this. Very few people would make that uncomfortable scenario immediately just by saying, hey, just letting you know your fly's down or whatever, to alleviate further embarrassment. Imagine if that person got through the presentation, went through their day, got home and then realized, then they're going to be really freaked out. They're going to be super embarrassed because they don't know how many people have seen them all day with their fly down. And also they would just have no faith in their team because they would think, I saw all these people today and not a single person told me that my fly was down. And so then that creates doubt within your team. You lose that trust for your teammates. So it's really important. Trust is the best thing for a team, for a company, for a group of people. So how can we show initiative at work? We've seen some examples of what is a good initiative example or response and what is a bad initiative response. So how can we do it? Being proactive at work involves a commitment to identifying issues and taking steps to resolve them. It's all about, yes, it's about helping you get promotions and jobs and just being a good person, but it's also just about doing the right thing, as we said, for no reward when no one's looking. So here's some basic tips to help you show initiative. The first one is just do more than what is expected of you. A person that doesn't take initiative just is the kind of person that always says, oh, that's not my job, or that's not my responsibility. Those kind of responses are a non-initiative response. There's nothing wrong with going beyond what is expected. You're asked to serve a customer for Hungry Jack's or something like that. But there's nothing that says you've got to do an amazing job of it, or you've got to go really beyond, or if the kitchen's really busy and you're not, you'll jump out the back and give them a quick hand, or you'll float back and forth between your team and constantly say, hey, who needs some help? Who needs some help? That is showing initiative and being a really great teammate, rather than just saying, no, I'm on the drive-through today, so I'm just going to sit here doing nothing while everyone else is flat out. That's not showing initiative. Make a career plan. So this shows initiative. If you can go to an interview, or you have a resume or a cover letter or something like that, and we're going to look at those next term, that really shows you've thought about your career plan. So you've got it laid out. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be in a few years. It's showing that you've thought about the future. You've thought about how am I going to get there. You've thought about that goal setting. So the career plan shows you've taken that initiative for yourself. Working on your confidence. There's a whole range of ways that you can do this, but working on your confidence is great for building that initiative. Like we said, that uncomfortable situation before about telling a boss or someone that their fly's undone. If you have a lot of confidence in yourself, it makes these things a lot easier to get through. Develop a team mentality. As I said, links to what I was talking about before with the example of you being on drive-through, but there are lots and lots of examples of that. So work on for yourself thinking more about the team than about yourself. It's not about every man for himself or every woman for themselves. And it's not about I need to get ahead or get the promotion at the expense of other people. It should always be I need to support my team. And my team will thrive because of that. It's not about whether I thrive, it's about whether my team thrives. You will thrive as a response to your team thriving. That'll come naturally. And actively request feedback and follow it. So constantly ask your peers or your boss and things like that, hey, can you just give me some feedback on how I'm doing? Do you think I'm the kind of person that takes initiative? And if they say, well, honestly, I can't really think of any times where I've seen you do it, then take that feedback and think about, all right, I need to improve on this. Or they might say, you actually do take a lot of initiative, but I think you can improve on this. And then follow those instructions to make yourself a better person. That's taking initiative. Employees or employers love people coming to them and saying, can you give me some feedback, or what can I do better? Because that shows you actually care about your job, you actually care about your performance. If you don't seek that feedback, the assumption is they don't really care how they're doing, they're just here for their money and they're going to get out. So you're showing that you don't really care about the industry. Always keep a positive attitude. This is always difficult at times. So there's going to be something going on in your life at work or outside of work, or at school, outside of school. But it's important to try and build that positive attitude, even if it's a bit of a facade. But again, it supports the team. It shows that you enjoy what you're doing. And that looks really great towards your initiative for the company. Be prepared for any opportunity. So that's that adaptability. Just be ready for something to pop up and you're like, yep, I'll take that on. Or I'll give that a crack, rather than being like, no, this is my job. This is all I'm going to do. I don't want to do anything else. Try to anticipate any upcoming issues and discuss them with your coworkers. This could be as simple as, say, you're a team leader or a manager, and like the fringe is coming up, or like the clipsil's coming up, or a major event, and realistically, say if it's you're working for a fast food franchise or a Foodland or pretty much anything, there's a good chance that you're going to start losing people for shifts because they're going to these functions. And so you can be proactive and be like, all right, let's work out a roster that works for everyone. Who realistically is intending to go to the fringe? Do you know when those are? Can we work around it? And then you can present that to your manager, or as a leader, that shows a great initiative for your team, which they will support, rather than you just booking them in for shifts and they have to call in sick or whatever. It shows a lot of initiative, and that's a very, very valued skill there. Share your ideas for workplace improvements. So if you see something around the place, you're like, you know what, I can do that better, or I think this would improve our workplace. Again, take that initiative to say, let's have that conversation. Let's see if we can improve it, rather than going, that's not my problem. I just work here. I don't set the rules. I don't make the machines or whatever, the policies. You can always improve that. Have your say about that. So let's look at interpersonal versus intrapersonal skills. Here we've got a basic guide. Interpersonal is about something involving relationships between persons, generally more than one. This is more to do with the individual mind or self. So intrapersonal is more about you. No external parties versus multiple parties, varied reasons to get involved, and this intrapersonal is more about critical analysis, response to loneliness, stuff like that. So we're going to break that down. So firstly, intrapersonal. The word intra means inside or self. So it's all about your own personal skills. And these skills are things like self-esteem, attitudes towards authority, which is always, a very important thing. We've also got self-control, emotional stability, and motivation. And you've got some examples here as well of like self-regard, independence, things like that. So it's all about your own social skills. Interpersonal is about two or more people. It's about the skills of dealing with other people. And you've got a list here of things like teamwork, active listening, responsibility, empathy, patience, flexibility, leadership, etc. And I've listed them here. So as well as dependability, oral communication, which is the most simple version of what this personal and social capacity is all about, just actually being able to communicate with people, but also conflict resolution and social etiquette, about how should I actually act in this scenario. A very common example of this is at school, using inappropriate language, which sure, outside of school, and realistically even for a teacher, they use some of that language outside of school, but then they come to school and they don't use that language because there's a social etiquette about what is appropriate in a certain situation. So swearing at school is not appropriate, not because just for the sake of it, it's just an etiquette of it. We're a professional facility, we're trying to build skills. It is not the time and place for just street language and using slang and swearing to people. Keep that for your own time outside of school. Just like you wouldn't go into a workplace, you wouldn't go into an interview and start swearing to a prospective employer. There's no way you're going to get that job. So think about that social etiquette. Understanding social language is very, very important. It's helpful for you as an individual as well as a leader to understand people's body language and social language in order to be a better listener to someone and also respond to a situation more appropriately when you figure out what should I say or how should I respond to this person based on having a good conception of what are they actually feeling right now. So some of the simple forms of social cues are things like facial expressions. So reading someone's emotions, and we'll look at some examples of that. Body language. This is all about showing interest and a person's comfort. And this works both ways. So one is being able to read, is the person I'm talking to showing interest or comfort? But also for yourself, it's very important that you project the right message. Some of the examples we'll see soon about like crossing your legs, not facing a person, sort of looking around at other things when someone's talking to you. That shows disinterest. And again, if you go to an interview or you're in an employment location and you're constantly doing this, it's not looking good for you. You're not showing these good capacities. Another one is voice, pitch, and tone. So being able to recognize things like sarcasm, detect seriousness in someone's voice, as well as pick up emotions in the voice as well. And lastly is personal space and boundaries. So very simple, and this one is just knowing an appropriate distance and comfort zone. It's not comfortable, it's not appropriate to be right up in someone's face when you're having a conversation. That's a very confronting scenario. And so just knowing what is the appropriate distance, how do I want to stand based on a certain scenario. So let's have a look at a couple of basic facial cues. Here we can see a range of different emotions, and it gives us some things to look for. So things like the drooping upper eyelid for sadness, the eyebrows down and together for anger, nose wrinkling in disgust, fear. We see a range of things, raised upper eyelids, tensed lower eyelids, surprise, mouth open, contempt, lip corner tightly tightened and raised only on one side. So these are just some subtle body languages that we see in the facial expression alone. Now we're going to look at some more detailed ones. So like I said, this works both ways. This is both for trying to read someone's body language and figure out what are they thinking, but it's also good to understand and think about how am I presenting. Sometimes we do these without even thinking about it. Sometimes we cross our arms just because it's comfortable. But if we understand how that can be perceived to someone who has this good social language skills, then we can change that consciously and be like, all right, I know I'm not trying to look disinterested, but they may think I am by crossing my arms, so I'm not going to do that. And that's one of the main benefits here. So here we've got things like eyes. So looking to the left and right, looking up could mean thinking, weighting up emotions and logic, so it's pretty good. Looking down signals more of a submissive thing. If you're being told off when you look down, I'm not saying don't do that, I'm just saying if you think about it, have you ever done it? If someone's been telling you off about something and you often just look down at the ground or at the table, it shows that you're feeling guilty because they're not wanting to face you. It could also mean disinterest. It obviously depends on the scenario. So we've got things like looking up, looking at the ears, looking someone straight in the eyes. Again, there's always different scenarios. It's good to have that intercultural understanding, whereas some cultures it's not acceptable or appropriate to stare into someone's eyes or make eye contact. Others, even in, say, our society, where in general it is accepted or expected, it's still, there's a balance there. You don't want to just stare straight into their soul the entire time that you're talking to them. It gets a bit weird, or some people find that very uncomfortable, but it's good to understand. The next one is lips. So pursed lips could be worried or indicate disapproval. Lip biting could be a nervous habit, so this might show that you have some anxiety, or it could indicate anger as well as a frustration. Looking at lips. If intensely, this might be finding it difficult to understand you. So this might be a hint that someone maybe can't hear particularly well, or they're really trying to focus on what you're saying because they're struggling to understand what it is that you're trying to say. Your hands. Things like palms up versus palms down can show different things. Palms up often has a very positive effect. Palms down could mean confidence, shows that you know what you're talking about. Clenched fists could mean firmness, resolve, could be aggression. There's a whole range of different things. Finger pointing at a person is generally an authoritative gesture. So you're saying like, hey, you over there, or can you answer this question for you? It's a very authoritative thing to do. And steepling, this is a display of confidence and self-assurance. The feet, how you put your feet. So I mentioned about crossing your legs. So often you may not even notice you do this or pay attention to someone next time that you're having a conversation. But in a seated conversation, people tend to point the toes of their top leg towards the person who they feel is the most approachable. So if you cross your legs, think about where you point the toes of your top leg. Often this is pointing towards the most comfortable person in that scenario. Pointing your toes towards the door may unconsciously be saying that you're ready to cut the talk short or you're ready to get out. And fidgeting may also mean that they're wanting to be out of the situation or their body is getting ready to take flight. So again, could go both ways. It could be you are uncomfortable and you want to get out, or if you're having a conversation and you notice that they're fidgeting their feet a lot, it may mean that they're actually very uncomfortable or they want to get out of this scenario. So an activity for you if you've gotten to this point, find yourself a group of 8 people. So it must be 8 people. If several people need to go through twice to balance the numbers, so be it, but you must have 8 people. There's going to be a tarp in the room. Once you're ready, come up and grab the tarp with your group of 8 and head outside. And what you're going to do is you're going to lay the tarp out on the ground and your entire team is going to stand on it. From that point, you need to flip the tarp over completely. So everyone is standing on the other side of it, but no one can step off the tarp. No one is allowed to touch the ground. So how you do this is entirely up to you. This is part of using these social skills, taking leadership, taking initiative. But the main thing is don't damage the tarp. Just be careful with it. Don't try and pull it or drag it along the ground or anything like that. I don't want to damage the tarp because it'll ruin it for everyone else. And someone's actually gone and bought that for this activity. So have some respect there. But that is the challenge. See if you can flip the tarp with 8 people standing on it. That concludes the video for today's lesson. Once you've completed the tarp activity, or if you're waiting for the tarp activity, just continue working on that folio part 3 and 4, which are due in a week or so.
You can do it!